Edgecombe 365 and Baylor Plus have teamed up to bring Baylor fans the ultimate content bundle. You can sign up now for $17.99 a month, a $5 monthly savings, and get instant access to all premium content on both websites. For more information, visit either Edgecombe365.com or BaylorPlus.com today. What's up, Baylor family? Welcome into Inside Baylor Sports, the official daily podcast of Baylor Athletics. It's Friday, October 11th, and today Grace and I are going to do our first true preview of the Baylor men's basketball team. We'll have a lot more of these in the future, but with Baylor's off week for football, we just found it was a good opportunity to just start looking into what this team returns, what their schedule looks like, who they have coming into the program, and just kind of bring everyone up to speed on what Scott Drew's team. It was a really interesting offseason with Scott Drew, spurning Kentucky to stay in Waco, which was great. I mean, I thought it was huge momentum for the program, especially after, a couple of years where they didn't live up to expectations or probably their own internal expectations as well as the media expectations. But man, you look at this roster and everything that they've done, and we're going to get into the details of this roster today, but the upside for this team, the experience of the team, the success of the individual players on the team, when you talk about the transfers that are in, the guys that are on the roster, there's so many variables that you just have to feel really good about this roster and the potential for what this team can do.
I mean, from a talent standpoint, this is a just ultra talented roster. And then they also have a lot of veterans on it as well. Guys that they brought in from the transfer portal who are going to add a lot of experience and just a lot of reps, a lot of playing time. And I think that's really important for a roster where you're trying to, again, integrate a superstar freshman, which is what Baylor's trying to do with VJ Edgecombe this year. And they've been doing that for a couple years now with Keontae George and Jacoby Walter, and then, of course, Jeremy Sohan and Kendall Brown. They've been kind of on a trend of doing this. And so now it's just about how do you build a roster around that kind of talent that allows them to play really well, but also allows the team to flourish, and seeing if you can get that mixture right is very important. I think Baylor's done a great job of getting much closer to that this offseason.
Yeah. So let's start with the returners for this team. And, it's such an interesting dynamic now with the transfer portal, specifically for basketball. I mean, you can change the outlook of your team so quickly, but it's also important to have returners. And Baylor has three core guys that you can really point to. I think we can start with Jaden Nunn, a senior, and kind of, I would say, brought in as a defensive-minded guard. I would say, probably scored better, maybe not as consistently because of the guys around him, but is a better scorer than anticipated. But this year is kind of okay, is your final step to take forward. And there's obviously Jeremy Roach as a transfer coming in takes that. But I expect him to potentially be a lockdown defender on the exterior of the defense. It's not going to be Davion Mitchell by any means, but he has that potential to do that. And you think that he's going to have a hungry mindset into his senior year.
I think this is a guy that's really going to benefit from one of the transfers they brought in Jeremy Roach, who we'll talk about here in a minute. But I think last year, Nunn was kind of given a task that he maybe wasn't ready for, of being just this, okay, you're going to come in and you're going to be our best perimeter defender immediately. And we're not going to put a bunch of really good perimeter defenders around you. And we're just going to expect you to lock down your guy. And he was not that level of defender last year. He just wasn't. I think that he can take a step forward, and I think he's a good defender. I think there's room for him to grow into that role, but I think having a guy like Roach who has experience and can guard is going to be really big for Nunn. And I think overall just the environment of this team defensively because of that. But very active hands. He'll get steals. He'll get in passing lanes. He'll make plays in that way. He shot 43% from three last year. I think he's a pretty reliable catch and shoot guy. The problem was last year he went through kind of highs and lows. It was shooting the ball outrageously well for a stretch and then not as good for other stretches. The free throw percentage is kind of baffling with the way that he shoots threes. He was at 71% last year, which not terrible, but nowhere near good enough for a guard at that level. You should be in the 80% range, and he's a good enough 3-point shooter that I think maybe he could get there this year as well, maybe increase that to another level. So yeah, I like Jaden Nunn a lot. They got him from VCU last year. He came in, played well, and is going to give them, I think, a good starting guy at the 2 position. I think he'll probably start there. That's my guess, at least.
Yeah. I think you looked at that national championship team and you hit on this, but Davion Mitchell was an elite perimeter defender. But he also had 2 other guys that did pretty well defensively as well, Maceo Teague and Jared Butler. And what they were able to do as secondary defenders that really took pressure, allowed Davion Mitchell to just kind of go all out all the time and not really worry about other things. Kind of like, this is your guy. And obviously Davion Mitchell was a first round draft pick and is still playing in the NBA and everything that he's doing. But Jaden Nunn needed help. And I think too, and moving on to the next returner, a guy in Langston Love being able to stay healthy is a key for Jaden just as much as Jeremy Roach is. He's a good defender, a bigger guy, can guard multiple positions. But you have 3 guys that you feel like, if Langston can stay healthy, that are going to be able to defend the perimeter. And also with Langston, give you some scoring opportunities in different ways than other guards will provide.
Right. And missing Langston Love, I think, was ultimately kind of the reason why they didn't make a run in the NCAA tournament. I think it was pretty clear what they were missing at the end of last year, and his ability to guard, his experience. He's played in a lot of games, even though he's also missed a lot of games as well. That kind of experience is huge. And also the fact that, when you get into these games in the tournament and you're subbing guys in and out, everyone's playing 100% the whole time, to have a guy who's a 6th man of that caliber is really, really tough to deal with. I mean, Langston shot 48% from 3 last year. Just absurd. Averaged 11 points per game in just 25 minutes per game. So super efficient. Did a lot of the dirty work. And I also think the thing that he did so well, and I think it's a big reason why they went out and got Jeremy Roach as well. But Langston does a great job of getting 2 feet in the paint. And whether that means he's scoring the basketball, which he does really well through contact, drawing fouls, or collapsing the defense is something they desperately needed late in the season, because they just simply could not get in the lane by the end of the year consistently enough.
Yeah. It's kind of been the theme. He's always dealt with weird stuff too, like the eye injury a couple of years ago. And he obviously the ACL, but all through his career, he's just kind of been riddled with injuries. And you hope now he's a redshirt junior because of this. He would potentially be a senior, but he's had to redshirt. He is a redshirt junior. And you just hope that he can stay on the court, stay healthy, because the team's potential, as we saw last year, was much higher when he was on the court. This team particularly that needs some experience and veteran leadership. You get it with Jeremy Roach and Jaden Nunn, but Langston's kind of that 3rd guy in terms of experience in the backcourt. And I don't want to just talk about the national championship team, but like there is a reason that those 3 guards were so high profile, and it's because they all played so well together. And there's 3 of them that could do a lot of different things in a lot of different ways. So Langston being healthy is a major key for this team. So another guy that's going to be a major focal point for Baylor defensively is Josh Ojawuna, a junior. He's developed so much throughout his career. You see him get better every year. I think now it's time for him to kind of take that next big step for his career. And I say that in defensively, like he shows so much potential at times. I remember a couple of times last season when he got the ball at the top of the perimeter, kind of took a couple of dribbles and then went and dunked the ball. Or he would defensively, he would make a play on the perimeter and go and dunk the ball across on a fast break. So he shows that flash of athleticism. He just needs to show it more while also developing what they want him to be to take that next step. And obviously guys around him are key, but man, I think there's just so much potential shot blocking wise, defensively wise. He can body guys up. What are your overall thoughts on how he fits in, especially because of another transfer that's going to be on the court this year for Baylor, and what Josh's role will be for this team?
So I think Josh is probably either going to start at the 5 or come off the bench and play a significant role to give them more size at the 5 spot. So we'll see on that. That's still to be determined, just kind of depending on how they want to use Norchad. But I think for Josh, the biggest thing is defense and physicality. When it comes to, and physicality specifically when it comes to rebounding the basketball. For his size and his athleticism, he's not a good enough rebounder, or at least he hasn't been at this point in his career, nor the rim protector that they need him to be. But I also think if you kind of look at this roster and you look at one guy, if you found one guy and just picked one guy on this team who took a huge leap, and if he took a huge leap, it would completely change the ceiling of the team, Josh might be that guy.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because they don't really have guys like him on the roster with his size and what he could bring to the table. Because you look at the rest of the roster, you feel great. They can shoot the 3-ball, they guard, they play good perimeter defense, but can they get the rebounds that they need to get? And can they protect the rim at the level that they need to? That's a big question mark. And I think a big reason why that's a question mark is because we haven't seen that from Josh O consistently enough yet.
Yeah. And so now his counterpart, a transfer, Norchid Omir, he's a senior from Miami, and basically a double-double machine throughout his career. And it's not just getting double-doubles. It's quite literally averaging double-doubles throughout every single year of his career. I think for the most part, for the entire season, he has done it. He's played on highly successful teams. He was a 96 overall grade, I believe, to On3 in terms of transfer portal rating, which is extremely high for transfer portal guys, and immediate impact. Like I don't think you're going to look at him and say he's a high potential NBA prospect because of his size and the things that he does, but he's so strong, so physical. The things that he does on the court, I mean, truly, man, like, is there another player that we can say, not necessarily on this roster, because I don't think there is one, but when Mark Vidal is the only one that I kind of see as the same type, and he's just different than Mark in a lot of ways. I mean, who's the next best comparison for Baylor fans to reference in Norchid?
Man, to reference, that's a great question, because Mark Vidal would be the one. And I mean, to compare them would be a little bit foolish. I mean, Mark was an elite defender and could move his feet really well, but Norchad is taller, longer, way better offensively, just way more basketball savvy to his game. And Mark was such a great player for Baylor, but he was more of a role guy. Norchad is a guy that can take over games and really put people in a bind. He can dribble the basketball well, get to the rim well, very explosive, working on his 3-point shot, specifically from the top of the key, which is where he likes to attack from. So yeah, I think he's in that mold of a Mark Vidal, of like a Rico Gathers type, where it's just like he's so strong and so physical and just so hard to keep off the glass. And that's what he's going to bring to the table. You mentioned it. I mean, he was at Arkansas State for 2 years, was an all Sun Belt guy his freshman and sophomore year, averaged a double-double in both those seasons. Then he transfers to Miami, averages a double-double both of those seasons, including last year where he averaged 17 and 10. He is a really good player, and in my eyes, a top 5 transfer portal prospect, a guy that Baylor really, I mean, kind of came out of nowhere to land. And it was a huge get for this group. And I think what he's going to bring is great rebounding, a lot when it comes to interior scoring and scoring in the paint. And then also the ability to switch 1 through 5. Defensively, he can give that to you in a way that Baylor hasn't really seen since Everyday John was able to do that for the national championship team. Yeah.
And I mean, it's Scott Drew, the way that he's kind of built these rosters from outside in a lot of ways. Now you throw in Amir, that's that focal point on the interior. And it's just, man, it's intriguing. Like I don't know if you're an opponent, how you necessarily deal with what Baylor can throw at you, specifically on the offensive side of the end. If they wanted to go 4 guards in 1 post, they can do that. And he's still a guy that can score from the perimeter. As you mentioned, getting better as a 3-point shooter. It's going to be very difficult. And I'm really anxious to see what Scott Drew does with this new face, but also with another new face in Jeremy Roach, and kind of the puzzle piece, right? The one puzzle piece. I mean, you like Amir and the way what he brings to this team, but to me, the key engine in this team was bringing in Jeremy Roach. He's a leader. He's had major success at Duke. You mentioned earlier, he plays perimeter defense really well. That can help Jaden Nunn out. But man, like there's so many things to like about Jeremy, and you, as a senior and a guy that's kind of looking through for his last run, everything he's experienced, like it makes sense for a guy like this on this roster to kind of be the final puzzle piece for the team to go to the next level, to potentially to another Final Four.
And Jeremy Roach wanted an opportunity to play point guard, and he is absolutely going to get that opportunity. The only other true point guard on this team is a true freshman, a very talented one, but still a true freshman. And so this is going to be Jeremy Roach's team. And that's where the identity of this team, I think, is going to form around him. And there's just a level of physicality, perimeter defense. The shooting is pretty good as well. He's gotten better and better, I believe, as a 3-point shooter. He's last year he was up to, I believe, 43% last year from three. So really took a nice step forward. And he shot, quite a few a game. I mean, nearly 4 a game. And so he brings that to the table. But the thing that he brings kind of more than anything else is postseason experience. And that is an area that this Baylor team does not have a lot of. I mean, Norchad obviously has it, but so does Jeremy Roach. And Jeremy Roach has helped lead this Duke team to multiple long paths in the NCAA tournament. No national championship, but good runs. And I think Baylor needed somebody who's been there before, and he and Norchad both have, because Baylor, the expectation is when you're a top 10 preseason team year in and year out, that you're making it to the Sweet 16 every single year. And that hasn't been the case yet for Baylor. And so I do think Roach gives them that. Lots of experience, lots of leadership. I think he's going to remind people a little bit of, some flashes between James Akinjo and Davion Mitchell a little bit. Just kind of in his mentality, his physicality. He's a different player than both of them, but strong, physical, gonna get to the rim, gonna shoot the 3-point ball well, and gonna try to get other guys involved as well.
Yeah, it's a major focal point. You mentioned him wanting to play point guard. Scott Drew has done a pretty good job with point guards over the years, and that, I mean, if you listen to him speak and talk about his successes, Sigum 365 did a great interview with him. Ashley Hodge did it, and you need to go listen to that and just kind of get a feel for who he is. Man, just potential key piece for this, and he wants to win. You bring in 2 seniors that played on pretty successful teams. They're not coming here to not go to the Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final Four, win a national championship. That's their ultimate goal, and that's why they both came to Waco together. So the third transfer on the list for this season is Jalen Celestine. He's actually a graduate. At least that's how Baylor listens on his website. But kind of the guy that replaces Jalen Bridges in a lot of ways. Like he does very similar things. Jalen Bridges was really good his 2 years on campus, and you want Jalen Celestine to be able to do those types of things. You want him to be able to shoot the 3 ball, to defend, to get timely blocks. He's a long guy, kind of listed as a guard/forward. Baylor actually lists him as a guard for this season, which is interesting considering his size. But what can you tell us about Jalen, what he did at Cal, and his background as a transfer, and what he's going to bring to this team particularly?
He's the guy not being talked about enough, I would say. And so he missed a whole season with an injury. And so he comes back last year and played really well, specifically shot 44% from 3 on 4 attempts per game, played really well for that Cal team, averaged nearly 9 points per game. But that was his first year coming off of a serious injury. And so now he's a year removed from that. I believe he has 2 years remaining, actually. And so I think that you could see him back for Baylor as well for a second year. But for this year, he's very important from the aspect of you could play him at the 4 or you could play him at the 3. So he gives them some versatility there. And then the 3-point shooting for a guy that's 6'7", ish, kind of in that 6'6", 6'7" range. His ability to shoot the basketball is for real. Like really, really good 3-point shooter, probably a better 3-point shooter than Bridges, even though I know Bridges had just some moments where he just got unbelievably hot. I think you're going to see that from Celestine as well. I really like this pickup. I think he fits kind of the rest of this roster really well and complements the guys that they already have.
Yeah, the length that he provides, and you look at what Scott Drew did in the portal this year, and it was clear that he wanted guys at all three levels of the team. He wanted a scorer. I mean, he wanted a point guard, he wanted a wing player, and he wanted a big man. And every one of these guys just seemed to fit in really well with what Baylor had returning. The freshmen that needed some supplementation, they couldn't be just thrown to the wolves immediately. That's what the transfer portal allowed them to do. And you bring in three guys, and I mean, it's kind of like we've talked about with football. Like, you can bring in a lot of guys, but that doesn't necessarily mean any results, right? Like, it doesn't mean that you're going to be good because of that. But each one of these guys seemed to fit in a particular role that Baylor absolutely needed to address, and throw on top of the fact that they're all really pretty good players already at high levels. Like, they're all major conference transfers. They're not nothing go guys that had to come up and prove it. They've already done it against top competition, and every single one of these guys plays a specific key role for this team this year. And it's just pretty cool success rate for what Scott Drew wanted to get onto this roster.
It absolutely is. And just lots of veterans, lots of experience, some postseason success for a few of these guys. It just, there's a really good mesh, I think, with this kind of, because it's two waves, right? We're kind of talking about the old guys right now, this old group of guys that, I mean, there's a lot of years between this group. And so how you kind of mesh that with the young guys who are going to play a big role is going to be very important.
Yeah, absolutely. So you talk about the old guys. Now you talk about the freshmen. Freshmen they're not obsolete in college basketball, but you really pick and choose your spots. So Baylor brought in three of them for the season. The first one's kind of the point guard of the future. After Jeremy Roach moves on, Robert Wright is probably your kind of a 3 to 4 year guy. There's not necessarily concerns about him. He's a great basketball player, but he's probably going to be in Waco for a while. What can you tell us about Robert? Obviously a great scorer, but overall, what can we anticipate from him this season?
So I think Robert is going to play a role on this team. I think he'll probably play, the first year, this first year. Like, he's not going to redshirt. I think he'll be their backup point guard. I think he'll play it'll probably be kind of scattered minutes if I had to guess. I think some games he'll play a lot more, other games he won't play as much. I think specifically in the non-conference, they'll try to get him a lot of looks so that he's comfortable in conference play with whatever role he ends up getting. I think in general, though, he's a guy that is like you said, point guard of the future. Really good ball handler, passes the ball well, can shoot the basketball. He led a dynamic attack at Mount Verde last year. And if you don't know Mount Verde, well, the projected number 1 overall pick went to Mount Verde and Cooper Flagg. And so he was kind of able to really accentuate his abilities as well and make Cooper even better last year. And so I think Robert just does a lot of things well. He's kind of a thicker, shorter guard, but just a very good ball handler and a great facilitator of the basketball. Kind of much more like a James Akinjo than the guards that they've had in other years, more of a true point guard. And I think that's kind of the difference between what Baylor's had recently and then what they had with Akinjo and what they're, I think, going to have with Robert Wright.
Yeah, no, it's key. And Scott Drew does a great job with point guards. I think you look at the guys that he's developed over the years that maybe you didn't feel like were going to be great point guards. And you brought them in, and what they were able to do within the system. Kenny Cherry is a guy that comes in mind. Like, it's just kind of like he can score the ball when needed, but he's going to do a lot of other things as well. But the list goes all the way back to Curtis Geralds and Aaron Bruce back when Scott Drew just first got to Waco. And like, he's always had a history of that. I like Robert Wright for multiple years and what he's going to be able to provide, learning a year behind Jeremy Roach. Jaden Nunn could possibly take some point guard responsibilities, but I think Robert Wright's your true backup if you need someone else to come in and play. So another true freshman that's kind of the forgotten of the three in a lot of ways. Obviously, another good player is Jason Asamoah. That is kind of a swing man, can do a lot of things on the perimeter. Good size. It's going to be able to be brought along slowly. I don't know that in most years that he would be, but I think because of the dynamics of Baylor's roster this year and the guys that they have around him, he's going to be able to kind of be utilized differently than just brought in and thrown to the wolves and have to be forced in a lot of playing time. I think he's going to have a role, but what are your overall thoughts on what Jason can do in this particular season and then beyond this particular season in terms of being a freshman and having multiple years left?
Right. And he's kind of another one where I just expect his minutes to kind of be scattered a little bit, more minutes here, less minutes there. But I will say he's impressed a lot of people who have been able to watch practice and just kind of see him in person. I mean, great size at 6'9", a tremendous wingspan that I think is over 7 feet. So great kind of, measurables there, a very good shooter, an accomplished scorer. He's kind of proven all of that. I think what it's going to come down to for him is rebounding and defense. If those two things take a big kind of step up as the season progresses, I think his role expands. But outside of that, I think he's probably going to be a guy that, is somewhere in the rotation, but I think at times maybe ends up kind of being a forgotten piece kind of during the Big 12 season, which happens when you shrink your rotation to only playing 7 guys, maybe 8 guys. That's where it kind of gets tough. But Jason's got a very bright future at Baylor. I think he's going to be a really, really key player for this program, and a guy that with him and Robert Wright, who could be multi-year guys, I think that's really important for the development of the program as well.
Yeah, and freshmen, it's interesting. We've seen Baylor have a lot of good freshmen. Keontae George, Jacoby Walter, like there are still roles for freshmen. It's the transfer portal has changed it so much when you can bring in guys that can fill gaps. Specifically, football is one thing. Basketball is another thing because of your ability to say, yes, we know what this guy's bringing us. He's one of 5 that's on the court at the time. What can he provide us? So freshmen, developmentally wise, like you want guys who are going to be in the program for a while. But you're never going to turn away a guy like VJ Edgecombe, Baylor's kind of prized freshman for this particular season. Not a guy that's going to have developmental time, high expectations. I mean, everywhere you turn right now, it's just like I use the term praise lightly, but like he gets a ton of praise, but I think it's legitimately backed up and with his capabilities. If you like guys who are athletic to play basketball, he's a guy that's athletic and plays basketball, but is also a good basketball player. Grayson, what can you tell us about VJ and what, as a freshman, can he bring to this team?
Special player. I think, a lot of people who have gotten to watch him, this offseason, it's one of those things where he's going to be a top 5 pick, but he might be closer to 1 than he is 5. And that's kind of the overall sentiment. What he did in the Olympics for the Bahamas team, and unfortunately they came up they were right there with qualifying for the Olympics. They were 1 game short in a game that was heavily contested that they probably should have won. They weren't able to get it done, but he started for the Bahamas. I mean, he's playing grown men, and he was playing really well and really just shining. And everyone that you kind of talked to that watched it, or everyone that wrote about him, it's just like there's something special about him. And it really, I think, solidified him as going into the season a top 3 NBA draft pick going into next year. He'll be a one and done guy, and for good reason. Very good athlete. So very different than the guys that they've recruited in my eyes over the past few years, where they're more scorers, Jacoby Walter, Keontae George, more scorers, or guys that have more development needed, like Sohan and Kendall Brown. VJ's explosive in the open court, an explosive leaper. The thing of it is Keontae George and Jacoby Walter, they only shot 34% from 3.
Yeah.
I think VJ can shoot around that. And then you add in everything else that he does, I think, better than those two from a defensive standpoint, from a athleticism standpoint. There's just another level to his game that maybe the other two didn't have. And I know, Keontae George is doing great in the NBA. I understand all that. But for winning in 1 season of college basketball, the athleticism and the defensive ability of VJ is massive. And I think gives this team something very unique, and gives this team an elite athlete and an elite prospect, which I do believe matters, especially in college basketball.
Yeah. So you look at Baylor's guards, and you talk about Jaden Nunn, Langston Love, Jeremy Roach, but VJ, obviously a lot to learn defensively, playing within the system, and it's not just one-on-one basketball, but his high-end potential, because of his athleticism and size at the guard position, you legitimately have 4 guys defensively at the guard positions. And I refer to the national championship team and talk about Adam Flagler is kind of the 4th guard on that team, but his ability to play defense and play strong role positions. Well, I would say that this team has the potential, with understanding that Davion Mitchell was a very good elite defender, to be as strong of a top four defensive guard set as that national championship team, understanding that Davion Mitchell was very strong defensively. These guys are going to know their responsibilities. They've been in college basketball. Nothing's going to catch them by surprise. They're going to play a quote assignment basketball. And I'm pretty sure that VJ's high end athletic ability, if he can go in and play within that, can be the difference maker to make this group better than what that national championship team was in terms of defensive guards. Do you agree with that or no?
I don't know that they can get to that level. There is just something about experience when you talk about defensive mindset and defensive ability. It's very rare that a freshman comes in and is able to guard it at a super high level. Can he match Jared Butler or Maceo Teague? Maybe in some ways. I think the thing that those two did so well was just positionally, they were always in the right spot. And it was just like, so you're getting hounded by Davion Mitchell, and then Jared Butler and Maceo Teague are denying passing lanes and getting steals or tipping passes to the high post, or kind of being able to free range to roam and make plays, but also always being in position, whether it's help defense or taking a charge or just being in the way of what a defense is trying to do. I think that takes time. So I don't know if VJ can get there, but I do think you're going to have those moments where you're like, wow, he just swatted a dude and he was all the way on the other block, or, oh, he got into the passing lane and then threw it down on the other end. I can definitely see that. I think missing a guy like Davion, who is just outrageous defensively, maybe sets this back a little bit. But I do think, there's no one to pick on, much like the 2021 team. So that's what makes it similar. You're not picking on any of these guys because they all can guard.
Yeah, well, I think my ultimate thought on that was that if VJ is your fourth defensive guard, because of his potential there, in any given moment, he is going to have the ability to lock up whoever's across from him. And I say that because he's a potential number one, number two, top 5 pick in the NBA draft because of his athleticism, because of his, he has that ability. So if he's your potential fourth guy that you're going to run out there on an offensive guard to say, hey, go lock him up, when you have Jaden Nunn, Langston Love, and Jeremy Roach, the depth at that position is so strong. In my mind, I'm not a huge basketball guy, but if he's potentially your fourth guy that you're going to send out there to go guard another team's, number one guard, you're doing pretty well, because he's going to be pretty athletic and have that ability. Now, he's going to have his lapses, I would assume, but I think he's coming with a mature mindset. He's obviously played against grown men in the Olympics, like you mentioned. So I'm excited to see him. But I think he's just a supplement defensively while doing other things at a much higher level because of his basketball ability and obviously his athletic ability.
Right. And I think a big part of that will also come down to Langston Love's health and, how far does he, come with his recovery? Because, that's been kind of an ongoing thing. So at what point does that take away some of his lateral quickness? We'll see. We'll kind of see on that. Something to monitor, I would say. But yeah, VJ's special. I think, everyone you talk to, he's a special person as well as a special player, and just a guy that is really driven. And I think for that reason, it's going to give them a great shot at having a very successful season. That's why a lot of people have Baylor as a top 10 team. Some have them top 5 in the preseason. And so kind of put all that together. And the reason for it is this combination of experience matched with high-end talent with VJ, and that kind of meshing together. I think the expectation is that it will.
Yep. So you basically have 3 returning players, 3 transfers, 3 freshmen. Very interesting balance. I'm excited to see how it plays out. The season will begin on November 4th against Gonzaga. Obviously, they'll be practicing long before then. They're already kind of getting close to really settling into their practice schedule. And we were going to preview the non-conference matchups today, but we've gone long on the roster. We're going to drop that into an additional episode at some point. It might be next week. But the non-conference slate is absolutely insane, especially when you consider the Big 12 season has expanded. There's less non-conference games, but you're talking about a schedule with Gonzaga, Arkansas, St. John's, in the Bahamas, the Bar-Mar Basketball Classic, I believe is what they're calling it. In that tournament, there's also Tennessee and Virginia, 2 very reputable programs, top 15 top programs over the last decade or so, and then UConn. So that's a brief overview of the non-conference matchups. We're going to get more into that in the rest of Baylor's non-conference before the season starts. And then obviously Big 12 play. Big 12 play is going to be nuts. You're talking about if you look at projected top 10 lists, there's no official polls out right now, but there's some top 10 lists that Baylor's one of those teams in the top 10. And of the other 9, Baylor will potentially face 6 of those throughout the season, some of those in non-conference. So Scott Drew's not shying away as expected, much different than early in his career in Waco, where he didn't face very many tough non-conference schedules. He's saying anywhere, basically any time, well, as much as college basketball is, you have non-conference matchups in neutral locations. You want those home and homes, but you're going to play them. You might as well play them. If you can't get the home and homes, go play them in a neutral location. So it's going to be fun. It is exciting as the last few years were. I think this team has a lot more potential. And then you throw in a non-conference mix that's going to test them immediately. I mean, literally the first 2 games, Gonzaga and Arkansas are potential top 25 teams. Gonzaga is. Arkansas is going to be close with John Calipari leading the way there after leaving Kentucky. So any final thoughts on the basketball roster and what's coming ahead for Scott Drew's team?
Exciting time. This team should be really, really good. There's a lot of things to be excited about, a schedule that's going to be really demanding and challenging, but also really fun to watch. And I think we'll prepare this team really well for March. Scott Drew's got another good one. So now we'll see if they can take advantage of that in the postseason this year. I'm excited about it, though. I think this is a really, really good basketball team.
Yeah, I think Scott Drew, Mark Few have led the way in these non-conference schedules over the last few years, and it's just ramping up. And I think it's great for college basketball. Like, college basketball starts in November. It needs to be noticed. It starts in November. It needs to be noticed in November and December before league play starts. Even though college football is going on, like, they're making a name for college basketball early in the season. So, all right, Baylor family, that's going to do it for today's episode of Inside Baylor Sports. As always, thanks to each of you for listening. For Grayson Grunhafer, I'm Colt Barber. Have a great Friday and weekend, and sick and bears.